Everybody, tonight we're glad to be together to worship God. In Matthew chapter 5, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says in verse 20, "I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." As you look through the pages of the New Testament, especially the Gospels, you might get the idea that the scribes and the Pharisees were pretty righteous people. Well, at least they thought they were. Or at least they pretended to be so that others would think they were. From outward appearances, it would be pretty difficult, one would think, to exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. And in fact, what Jesus would go on and say in the Sermon on the Mount is quite challenging as far as the kind of life that he would want anyone to live in order to please God. In Matthew chapter 23, Jesus has a lot to say about the scribes and Pharisees. And he points out that, after all, their righteousness wasn't all that much. And the reason that it wasn't all that much was because it was hypocritical. It occurs to me that righteousness must be a really valuable thing to have if even the hypocrite covets it. Because think of it, the hypocrite is trying at least to appear righteous. He covets it. He wants what it has to offer. He just doesn't want to be righteous because that requires, sacrifice and stuff like self-control. So, in Matthew 23 and verse 25, Jesus says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cleanse the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of extortion and self-indulgence." The scribes and Pharisees, they sort of just did what they wanted to do, what they felt like doing, but they didn't want everybody to know that. Blind Pharisee, first cleanse the inside of the cup and dish, then the outside of them may be clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inwardly are full of dead men's bones and uncleanness. Even so, you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Just over a year ago, I got to visit Jerusalem and see the hillside of the Mount of Olives coming up from the Kidron Valley is just covered with tombs. I mean, there are thousands of them. I don't know how many exactly, but bunches and bunches of really beautiful structures from the outside. It's an amazing sight, really. It's awe-inspiring. And some of the tombs are actually quite old, kind of down in the valley, and extremely beautiful, look like miniature temples, that sort of thing. But if the corpses are still in there, that it's not near as nice on the inside as it is on the outside. People can be like that, can't they? Maybe somebody here tonight's like that. Where to everybody sitting around you, you're just a lovely person. But inside you're full of dead men's bones. Self-indulgence. Doing what you want to do instead of what God wants you to do. Jesus would clean you on the inside with his blood. Your righteousness must exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees. So if you're willing to give your life to Jesus or admit the sins that you've committed and ask for forgiveness if you're a Christian, we'd ask you to come now while we stand and sing.